p.m. Notice of this meeting has been advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act of 1975, Chapter 231, known as the Sunshine Law. This is a regular meeting which public participation is permitted and action will be taken. Please silence all cell phones now. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Solisi?
Present.
Ms. Baumeister?
Present.
Ms. Brush?
Present.
Mr. Four?
Here.
Mr. Vaccaro?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Bates?
Present.
And for the record, we have Board Attorney, Mr. Liston, Board Engineer, Mr. Theodos, Town Planner, Mr. Roberts, and Nicole Ashgar, Zoning Official.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with the agenda. We're going to address memorialization, the statutory extension of time site plan. Green Acres Commercial Office Center, Block 60.10, Lot 1, Green Acres Road and Highway 70. Applicant Futures Trust, approved June 2nd, 2008, approved May 2nd, 2016. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Ms. Brush?
Yes.
Ms. Baumeister?
Yes.
Mr. Four?
Yes.
Ms. Solisi?
Yes.
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Now address application. First application is a minor site plan approval for gazebo, block 75.172, lot 73. The applicant is Crestwood Village 6 Community Association.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Liston. This application is being filed by Crestwood Village 6 Community Association in order to basically put up a gazebo.
Can't hear you.
Could you also identify yourself?
Ronald Catelli, the Reseal Law Firm on behalf of the applicant. It's basically to put up a simple pre-constructed gazebo. There are no homes within 200 feet of it. It's completely on my client's property. The application is complete and it's in front of you. If you have any questions of my client, you're certainly welcome to ask them now.
Chris?
I don't have any questions. I trust that the applicant has received a copy of what we do, maybe from the 27.
Yes, absolutely.
The items are pretty straightforward for administrative comments. Say hello.
They can't hear you.
We can't hear back here.
I believe the only question that we have is relative to testimony regarding impact of any easements or areas or impact of any portions of the site for the use or the purpose.
There are none. There are no setback violations or anything like that. It's completely within our property. It's not an enclosed gazebo. It's a pre-constructed gazebo.
My understanding the setback is proposed 25 feet.
Yes.
I have no clue.
Any questions or comments from the board to my left? To my right?
No, I have no questions. It's a minor site plan approval. We can act on it based on our engineer's plan.
May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Ms. Baumeister?
Yes.
Ms. Brush?
Yes.
Mr. Four?
Yes.
Ms. Solisi?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second application we'll be hearing this evening is a minor site plan approval for a pole barn, Block 75, Lot 89, applicant Crestwood Village Co-op 4, Inc.
Good evening once again. Ronald Catelli, the Resealed Law Firm on behalf of Crestwood Village Co-op 4. And I also have with me tonight Shirley Heinen, who's the president of Crestwood Village Co-op 4, as well as Dan Fisher of FW Associates. And I'm actually going to turn the application over to Mr. Fisher to fill the board in on what the application is all about.
Mr. Fisher, would you raise your right hand, please? Solemn swear testimony you're about to give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Would you please advise the board of your professional credentials and the company for whom you work?
Sure, I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've been working on civil engineering design plans for approximately 18 years.
Thank you.
Okay, members of the board, we have,
Please use the mic, so sure. You can take it, it comes off there.
Or tilt it up. If it's on green.
Yeah, hold it. It's just easier if you hold it, because you're probably going to be walking around.
okay. The existing property, as it relates to this application, is in the rear of the clubhouse, the parking lot of lot 89 and block 75. Clubhouse is located on 14 East Moccasin Drive. It's in the RC zone. The area is open and surrounded by woods to the north, south, and west sides. If I can just show you, this is basically the open area, you can see that. And this is where our application is proposed here. Currently, this area is being used as a maintenance area by Crestwood Co-op 4. It contains about 4 sheds, a fence, concrete pad, broken up asphalt, and various equipment. What this application proposes is to demolish most of that, especially the asphalt, broken up asphalt, and concrete pad, and to install the 96 by 60 by 16.5 feet high pole barn in this open area with an improved asphalt access way. This would be for maintenance equipment. There's no sewer or water proposed or drainage. So if you look at the map here, the open area is over here behind the clubhouse. This is the clubhouse. This is the parking lot. And this is the open area where we propose the pole barn. This is where the... Okay, so this is the clubhouse located on Moccasin, and there's a parking lot here and an open area in the back. And this is where the pole barn is proposed to be. Right now, this is an open area where right now Gulf War is keeping all of their equipment and the shed and broken up concrete back here and broken up asphalt. So we're going to remove all of that broken up concrete, asphalt, and we're going to put in the other drawing just for a second. We're going to put in a nice, good job, you put that down. We're going to put in a nice asphalt access way and the pole barn. They have a shed here that was existing that we're going to keep. And that's basically the application. There's no sewer or water proposed, and there's no drainage infrastructure being proposed.
Chris, you want to refer to your report?
Does the applicant have an opportunity to review the planning and review letter of June 1st of 2016?
Yes. Yes. Yes, we have.
And you agree to comply with the conditions which are basically administrative?
Yes, sir.
Is there any impact regarding any easements that are in place relative to the construction proposed? No, there's not. Basically using the area that is presently used for storage. That's correct. We'll be closing it. Yes. I have no further questions.
I have no comments on whether members of the board may have comments or questions.
Comments or questions from any members of the board on my left? Members to my right? I'm going to move a motion to approve.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
a second? Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Vicaro?
Yes.
Ms. Baumeister?
Yes.
Ms. Brush?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Ms. Solisi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
We'll now be moving to the administrative session of the meeting. First thing on the agenda is on referral by town council of the ordinance to adopt the Manchester Heritage Town Center redevelopment plan. Comments from Mr. Liston?
Yes, I'd just like to alert the public to what this is all about. Well, let's wait till the room clears of the former applicants. And while we're doing that, I'd like everybody that is here and interested in this matter to know that calling out and yelling out and applauding or booing or any of that stuff that happens at football games will not be tolerated here. This is a quasi-judicial body. You will all have the opportunity to be heard on this issue before the board decides it, but I'd ask you to be as polite to the board as they, as volunteers, have always been to the citizens of this township. Let me take a moment to tell you about what this process really is. The Planning Board's recommendation concerning the redevelopment plan is not a binding public act. The statute involved, NJSA 48:12A-7C, provides, in pertinent part, prior to the adoption of a redevelopment plan, the Planning Board shall transmit to the governing body, within 45 days after referral, a report containing its recommendation concerning the redevelopment plan. This report shall include an identification of any provisions in the proposed redevelopment plan which are inconsistent with the master plan, and recommendations concerning these inconsistencies and any other matters as the board deems appropriate. The governing body, when considering the adoption of a redevelopment plan, shall review the report of the planning board and may approve or disapprove or change any recommendation by a vote of a majority of its full authorized membership, and shall record in its minutes reasons for not following the planning board's recommendations. The determination by the planning board this evening, or whenever they make it, is a preliminary recommendation and is not binding on the governing body. So the governing body can either accept the recommendation in full or in part, or reject it in full or in part. It's recommendatory only. As the redevelopment plan notes, the Heritage Mineral Site has a lengthy history and is subject to multiple settlement agreements and consent orders, including the federal court order that was referred to last meeting. The redevelopment plan acknowledges that its implementation would require amendments to those settlement agreements, and the redevelopment plan could not be implemented unless and until those settlement agreements are so amended. The process established by law for making that determination is to adopt a redevelopment plan by ordinance following referral to the planning board for recommendation, and the statute there is 48:12A-7. That's what we're here to do tonight, make a recommendation to the Township Council with regard to the redevelopment plan and the ordinance that implements it. The planning board is charged by law to undertake this action and to make its recommendations, which, as I said before, are not binding on the governing body. And whatever the planning board does tonight is not, in my view, as a lawyer, actionable because it's not a final decision. It's merely a recommendation. With that preface to what we're about to undertake, I would ask that Dave Roberts, who is the town planner, be sworn. Mr. Roberts. Solemnly swear testimony about to give before this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Yes, I do.
Proceed.
I'm going to try to make this, I'm going to try to keep it short so people will all mind. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and pardon my back to everyone in the audience. Members of the board, as I mentioned before, my name is Dave Robertson, but my main purpose here tonight is just to give it a brief overview of what's really been going on with the working group for the past year. It was almost a year ago today. It was June 7th of 2015 when the working group started to meet. So it's been meeting for over a year. And I also wanted to use this opportunity to put some context, really to just build on a little bit of what Mr. Liston just kind of laid out from a legal standpoint, but a little bit more from a planning perspective. So I'm just going to walk you through sort of a relatively quick PowerPoint to give that overview. Obviously, members of the board have had copies of the plan for a while now. I've had a chance hopefully to take a look at it and review it, and they have some comments to offer to the governing body at the end of the presentation. First, I wanted to just provide a little bit of background on what this procedure really is. As Mr. Liston mentioned, it's unusual in terms of what the board usually deals with, which is the Mr. Land Use Law as your legal backdrop. The local redevelopment and housing law, which is Mr. Liston had just indicated, is Title 48, Chapter 12A, and then it runs through an entire litany, very comprehensive, was actually created and adopted in 1991, and it provides, the idea of that statute is to try to provide everything you would need to know about redevelopment in one place, kind of like the municipal land use law does for planning and zoning applications. Am I still good?
Give it to Mary Ann.
That's great. What, not touch them?
I don't know why it's doing it, I can't.
Okay, we'll just work there through it. Basically, the redevelopment is this first slide. Can I speak really loud, or is that going to work?
Can you stand in the corner over there and face us so we can hear you? Like the board, since the board already knows.
I'll try, but the logistics are challenging. I have to be able to reach the computer. Okay. Is that fine? Very good. I don't know if this is actually working. Very good. Yeah. We'll try and work it this way then. And I'll try to use the pointer so that I can. If I were to stand here, is that better? Is that to the corner? I can't stand there because I can't reach the computer. Redevelopment is a process to rebuild or restore an area in a measurable state of decline, disinvestment, or abandonment. This is a quote from the Redevelopment Handbook. Redevelopment may be publicly or privately initiated, but it's commonly recognized as the process governed by the local redevelopment housing law, which I just mentioned, and undertaken in accordance with a redevelopment plan, which is the actual subject of tonight's hearing, or tonight's review by the board, adopted by the municipality, which is done by ordinance by the governing body. If used correctly, it can transform a distressed area into an economically viable and productive part of the community. And obviously, we're talking about a very large piece of property that has been in a state of decline and abandonment for quite some time, many years. What this redevelopment plan is, and what the statute defines it as is an outline for the redevelopment of the redevelopment area. Just to, I'll go back to the next slide, so I keep this moving process. This one I will have to stand here as well. I'll try to move around a bit. Step one of the redevelopment process is that the governing body authorizes the planning board to undertake a preliminary investigation to determine whether or not an identified area is in need of redevelopment. That occurred about 2 years ago, 2014. This is, as far as I know, Manchester's first experience with the redevelopment process and the redevelopment statute, and that's one of the reasons why I'm spending a little extra time on background this evening. Step two, the planning board conducts an investigation and holds a public hearing on the redevelopment area designation. That again happened in 2014. That is the required public hearing for that designation. Once that planning board holds that hearing, the governing body then designates all or a portion of the area as an area in need of redevelopment. In this particular case, the area in need of redevelopment that was designated in 2014 is the area that's approximately 3,800 acres on the coastal zone side of the heritage mineral site. As a lot of folks here know very well, that site actually comprises approximately 7,000 acres. A portion of it's in the Highlands and a portion of it is in the coastal zone. The area that was designated was the portion in the coastal zone, so it's roughly the area on one side of the old freight rail line. So that is the next step. Then the next step after that is kind of where we are now, is actually the step that started about a year ago. And that is the governing body either prepares a redevelopment plan or asks the planning board to prepare a redevelopment plan. When you designate an area in need of redevelopment, it doesn't really do anything until you come up with a plan. And as I mentioned before, a plan is an outline. It doesn't necessarily have to provide every single detail, because one thing that also happens with a redevelopment process that's different from a normal zoning process is that there's two other steps that occur after the plan is adopted. One is that there's normally a redeveloper that is selected. In this case, this particular redevelopment area, the area of heritage that's in the coastal zone, was designated as a non-condemnation redevelopment area. That is an amendment that was made to the statute in 2013 to differentiate a redevelopment area where property can be acquired through the use of eminent domain from a redevelopment area where you will not use eminent domain. In this particular case, the property was all under the same ownership, obviously, for Hobson's for many years. There was no need to designate it as an area, as a condemnation redevelopment area. There would be no reason for the township to try to acquire 3,800 acres of property from private property. But in this particular case, the property owner had a common interest to try to do something with the property if certain things would happen and fall into place. So this was a non-condemnation redevelopment area, and effectively the next step was to prepare the plan. This is where normally the zoning body would have a plan prepared either by the board and referred back, or independently referred to the board for comment, much like a zoning ordinance amendment. If anyone's familiar with how a zoning ordinance gets amended or adopted, is referred by the governing body to the planning board for review and comment, and then the board provides a report back to the governing body before they have their second reading and public hearing and adopt it. And in this particular case, the only difference is that the planning board has 45 days instead of 35 days, but otherwise it's the same process. And it's done by ordinance. The reason that the redevelopment plan is adopted by ordinance is because it has the same effect as a zoning ordinance. Effectively, the zoning ordinance, because it's adopted by ordinance, provides you with rules and regulations for how you can develop a piece of property. A redevelopment plan has certain requirements in the statute for what it must contain, and the best way I can describe it is, even though it's an outline for the redevelopment of a particular redevelopment area, it's kind of a combination of a master plan and a zoning ordinance all rolled into one document. So the statute requires that it state its relationship to goals and objectives of the municipality, and there are a number of other required components of a redevelopment plan that it must address. For example, one thing that a redevelopment plan must do is identify any properties that are necessary for acquisition. In this particular case, with a non-condemnation redevelopment area, there are no properties identified for acquisition because the property owner already owns them. But that's just one example. But basically, the main pieces would be the policy piece, which is the outlining the vision for what the site could become, as opposed to what it is today, and then the regulatory components of the plan. The regulatory components can range from being very general and very broad, and relying on response from the private sector as to how they interpret that vision, or the redevelopment plan can be very detailed and specific. It depends on the situation and the circumstances in each town, and there's no right way or wrong way to do a redevelopment plan. The statute is very broad in terms of the flexibility that it gives to a municipality. In this particular case, as we'll get into, the site is so immense in size that the idea of trying to be extremely detailed would be almost impossible. So effectively, the general gist and the general thrust of this redevelopment plan was to offer an alternative to the potential use of the site, given its strategic location effectively between Route 37 on one end of town and Route 70 on the west end of town, to see if there was an alternative to the original approval, which was a approximately 2,405 or so unit age-restricted community. And that's where this idea came from of a mixed-use, sort of a town center idea, which is putting together a number of uses that are in close proximity to each other and kind of support each other economically. And that's the premise of the plan. The step 6 that we have is that once the redevelopment plan is adopted, the governing body, the way the statute works, is automatically the redevelopment entity. In other words, unless they delegate that authority to some other entity, the statute specifies what they could be. They could create an independent agency. They could defer to the county improvement authority. There's a number of options. But in this particular case, Manchester so far has opted for the governing body to retain that authority. So the governing body effectively is the redevelopment entity in Manchester. And if this is the only redevelopment project that Manchester ever does, then this would be the only redevelopment entity situation that the governing body would be in. And they would oversee the implementation of the plan, which, as you can imagine, could take decades if it were to actually happen at all. But that is the entity that would then select a redeveloper, and in this particular case, at least for now, the redeveloper would be presumed to be the property owner. And then they would undertake these redevelopment projects under a redevelopment agreement, which would be a contract between the municipality's governing body and the redeveloper that would set a schedule, that would basically set forth the detail of phasing and everything that would have to happen to see the project take fruition. This would also govern things like when roads would be built and other things that would be necessary to support a project of this size. So that's effectively the process in terms of an outline. As I mentioned before, and I'm sorry, Bill, for stepping in front of you. As I mentioned before, the working group was formed a year ago, almost exactly. Where that comes from, the authority of that, is in section 42 of the statute. It allows for, recognizing that governing bodies may sometimes need advice from a broader cross-section of the community, allows for a municipality to create what the statute calls an advisory council. And that would be to advise it regarding redevelopment matters. And in this particular case, the governing body created what they call the Heritage Minerals Site Working Group last year. They began to meet in June, I believe it was June 6th or 7th of last year. They had regular scheduled meetings on I believe it was the first and third Wednesdays at 3 every other week. And during that period of time, we did things like talk to traffic consultants, both brought in by the property owner and the town's own experts, to go over things like circulation through the site. The working group, just to give you I should have started with this, the composition of the working group consists of the mayor, 3 members of council, two every meeting of which they alternated, so that only 2 would be sitting at a particular meeting at a time. The township's business administrator, the township's superintendent of schools, so that the school system would be represented at the table, the police chief or the police chief's designee, so that the public safety folks would be represented, the director of public works. Obviously, that's a major component in terms of the cost of municipal services. The director of utilities, water and sewage treatment is another big consideration for any kind of development, whether it's the existing approved development or some kind of new development. A member of the planning board, a member of the zoning board, the secretary to the mayor to help record notes, and then a member of the senior advisory committee. change. So that was approximately a 13 or 14 member working group that held these meetings. There were a couple of meetings that were carried or postponed or rescheduled over the course of a year, but though that group dealt with a lot of the macro issues, including the pros and cons of town center style development, the traffic issues, how to deal with that, things like that. And probably the most important, or the most that got the most attention, would be the economic issues, especially the fiscal impact on the town. The township actually brought in its own expert to review what was being provided by the property owners experts, and the working group kind of monitored that whole process. So that was the function that they had leading up to the point where a draft plan was released by the working group to the governing body to be introduced. This map that's on the screen is actually the site, and you'll probably only be able to see this gold line, and the site is so huge that probably the one thing that everybody kind of recognizes are the two lakes, the two long, almost like finger lakes that were created through dredge mining over the years that are very deep, and then the extent of the site around it. One thing that I would point out is that Route 37 to the east and Route 70 to the west are accessible through the site. The one place where there would have to be a bridge was also included in the redevelopment area, which was Block 44, Lot 16, which is also owned by Hobson's. The remainder of the site is Block 75.01, Lot 1. It's really one big lot, probably approximately 3,800 acres. So that would be the actual redevelopment area that this plan would apply to. And I just want to make one other observation, is that a redevelopment plan cannot apply or pertain to any land that isn't already designated as either a redevelopment area or a rehabilitation area. So it's a very specific application of the plan. It can't apply to properties nearby. It's specifically for that area. Well, now, in terms of what the planning board's role is here, I thought it was important because we're at a planning board meeting, to focus on the planning board this evening. And one of the first things they do is they hold that preliminary investigation. Then the next time the planning board gets involved would be a night like tonight when they're reviewing the redevelopment plan, so they're familiar with what the general outline and development standards would be for the area, and they have a chance to comment on those. They also then, it's important to note that once a redevelopment plan is adopted and a redevelopment agreement's been signed, and the plan, the way the plan normally is implemented is it's broken down into actual projects. And on a site this large, you can imagine that they would be coming in over a period of years with pieces of it. Much like if you, like the Crestwoods, when they first were developed back in the 60s, 70s, they were developed in phases. And at each time that there's an application ready to come in, it would have to come through the same subdivision site plan review process that any other application comes through. So that means that anyone within 200 feet would be noticed, and this board would get into the details. That's where the actual real site plans provide that kind of detail. And really, what I wanted to illustrate with this is that the planning board's involved every step of the way. They're involved when the area is designated, they're involved when the plan is being reviewed, and they're then involved as each individual project comes through for site plan or subdivision approval. It's called development approval. They also would be, if this ever came up, if there was ever a need to to designate an area for rehabilitation, which is a different type of area. It's more about areas where the housing stock may be getting older. There's a need to encourage investment and rehabilitation, and that's a different area. The planning board also reviews that as well. And then finally, every time there's a master plan update or a re-examination, the municipal land use law requires that any actions that the municipality has taken with regard to designating a redevelopment area or adopting a redevelopment plan must be accounted for and addressed in that re-examination report. This board actually has done a re-examination report in 2015, and then it was amended, where there was an addendum added in 2016, which followed this process that I was outlining before. The fact that the area was designated was referenced in the re-exam report, And then most recently, the addendum that was adopted in March of this year made reference to the fact that the working group had been working on a redevelopment plan that was based on a town-centered approach to the site. And that really covers what the planning board does. In terms of what actually is part of a redevelopment plan, I'll kind of help to speed it up where I've already said something, but it governs the development within the redevelopment area, so that's really the most important role it has. It's kind of like the zoning ordinance for that redevelopment area. It states the goals and objectives for the redevelopment or rehabilitation area and relates them to the comprehensive planning goals of the town. It specifies land uses and building requirements within the redevelopment area. In this particular situation, the way it's being done is through what's effectively a framework. It's like the skeleton of the potential general layout where the streets would go, and then land uses are broken down in pieces with the idea of a center, town center core in the middle, and a variety of different uses around that, almost like a concentric circle. So the idea would be to draw people towards the center of the site, either from Route 37 or from Route 70, and have a variety of uses around that core, mostly like retail goods and services that would be attracted and supported by the new residential development that would be built there, as well as the rest of the township. Would kind of give a central focus to all of Manchester. That was kind of the idea. It can either supersede, the redevelopment plan can either supersede the zoning ordinance, because remember, there's already zoning districts within this area. This site is actually in 2 or 3 different zones right now. Or it can act as an overlay zone. It's really important to stress that in this particular case, the recommendation was that this would be an overlay. So this town center would effectively be the boundaries of the redevelopment area that I showed on the map. Any of the existing zoning would stay in place, which would mean that the retirement community zoning that is currently most of what the site is zoned for, most of the deep part of the site, would stay in place. So it could either be developed as the retirement community that the original settlement agreement called for, or if they are able to modify their settlement agreement, and there's a lot of different hurdles that have to be overcome in terms of water, sewer service area, qualifications, and all kinds of things. If all of that was able to be done, then they'd be able to effectively use the overlay. So effectively, that the zoning doesn't change, but the overlay provides an option if a certain number of steps can be taken. And that's basically how the zoning works. It's really kind of an overlay. It's the entitlement starting point to all the other approvals that we have. It also identifies properties to be acquired if applicable, and I already mentioned that doesn't apply in this case, and it's adopted by ordinance of the governing body. So that's what a redevelopment plan kind of is. And obviously, it can control the design and development within the development area. One other thing that's a little different about a redevelopment plan than what you normally see in the zoning ordinance is because the zoning ordinance applies across the entire municipality. So for example, if you're in say an R15 residential zone, the zoning standards apply to every R15 residential zone everywhere in Manchester. In this particular case, because this redevelopment plan applies only to this site, the plan can have a lot more design specificity than a normal zoning ordinance can have. So there is the ability to dictate things like architectural design and landscape design and all kinds of requirements for buffers and all those types of things, not only based on the plan, but also based on the redevelopment agreement when they really start to hash out the details. So there's a lot more control that a municipality has over a project through the redevelopment process, and that's one of the reasons why the township considered using the redevelopment process for a site this big and this important in the township. The goal, I'm just going to read this, is taken from the plan. This is the primary goal. There's really only one main one. The goal of the town center redevelopment plan is to promote the development of a compact, pedestrian-oriented, so walkable town center with potential for 24-hour activity consisting of retail and employment facilities, vibrant mixed-use areas, open space, and recreation facilities, and residential living environments that provide a broad range of housing types for an array of housing needs. That's a lot of words, but what it's really trying to do is paint paint a vision picture of what the goal is, what the vision is for this site, especially given the fact that these lakes are in the middle of the site and they offer a potential amenity. Currently, right now, they're effectively a hazard because they're dangerous. Because the site is so large, so it's very difficult to police. But the idea would be to be able to allow them to serve as the focal point for this town center. And it actually, what it kind of reminds me of a little bit is some of the villages along the Finger Lakes in New York. You know, everything's focused around the lake. So that's kind of the vision of the plan, the way it's overlaid with work. And I'm gonna try to stay out of the way as much as I can. But in order to read this, these are specific objectives. So once you set the overall goal, the things that the town's trying to achieve, if the plan could be implemented, would be first to promote a diverse mix of residential, business, commercial, office, institutional, educational, recreational, and cultural and entertainment activities for workers, residents, and visitors. So right there you get the range of potential uses that the plan is contemplating, because it mentions residential, business, commercial, so it's not just retail, it's other types of commercial, office, institutional, in case, you know, ideas of schools and other types of things, educational, recreational, and cultural and entertainment activities. So that's one objective. The next one is to encourage pedestrian-oriented development at densities and intensities that would help promote transit usage. Obviously, around here, there's not much transit. But I think one of the ideas that was being considered was if you create enough critical mass in a particular location like this, you could then talk about things like park and ride and whatever for bus service. There's also some freight rail lines that run through the site. There's been a study of Route 37 corridor that was done by an entity called Together North Jersey that talked about the potential activating passenger use. May or may never happen, but this site is actually accessible to that line. And so that's the reason for that objective. The third one is to promote the health and well-being of residents by encouraging physical activity, alternative transportation options, and greater social interaction. So that's really about creating spaces that are more walkable, more bikeable, where you can get from one place to another without having to get in a car and drive necessarily. And that's calls for a healthier living environment. Some of those situations already exist in a couple of places in town, in Whiting in particular, where you can walk to the store if you wanted to, but that's kind of the idea. Create a center that represents a unique, attractive, memorable destination for visitors and residents. So make it something that sets it apart from other types of development in the area that might be similar. To encourage lively, community-scale activity areas and gathering places throughout the promotion of high-quality urban design. So not just buildings, but parks and plazas and all the different types of spaces that people would like to be in that are attractive and places you'd like to spend time. Ensuring that all buildings are consistent with and enhanced by high-quality streetscape amenities. So you can see the idea that the objective is to try to get a high-quality buildings, high-quality streetscapes, and open spaces. And then to accommodate off-street parking in a convenient manner that does not interfere with the rhythm of street and building facades. And that sounds like architect speak, but basically the idea is to keep the parking in one place and the pedestrian activities where they're not going to get in conflict with each other. So it's comfortable to cross the street, it's comfortable to walk from place to place along sidewalks. It's all about parking lots and other things being in the way. So that's really effectively the main piece of the plan. The principles, we set forth some principles in the plan I thought from a macro issue it's important to go through. One of the first ones is that the redevelopment plan explores the potential of the town center approach to enable a more sustainable economic future for its residents through the creation of a wide variety of housing types and a density and range of affordability that would be sufficient enough to support retail business services in the township, which would in turn relieve the tax burden on residential property owners. So that's a principle of the plan. That's what the plan is trying to do. And part of that is to achieve an economic balance in the plan, and that's based on a premise that a substantial number of residential units are typically needed to support what the plan's goal is to generate the demand for 100,000 square feet of retail within that site. in order to support that, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about, maybe the normal Walgreens CVS these days is about 20,000 square feet. Some of the larger, sort of in-between retail stores might be between 40 or 50,000 square feet. Supermarkets these days don't even start until you're way over 50,000, because the 50,000 square foot retail stores, supermarkets are a thing of the past. But then all of the other support stores that gather around those anchors are probably going to range anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 square feet each. So when you start to put them together, it doesn't take long to get up to 100,000. So that was sort of the outside goal. The key to this is whether the market will actually support it. And that's something there's no way to actually predict. Basically, what the plan does is it sets the outline for it, and then the development sector has to respond to the plan. And it may mean that it goes through a couple of economic up and down swings as it goes through development. Another principle is that the residential density for each phase and/or land bay, remember the land bays are created by the street network, of the redevelopment area, that the plan permits residential development will be covered in one or more redevelopment agreements. So we're anticipating that there might be one big redevelopment agreement that covers the whole thing, or it may be broken down into a series of redevelopment agreements, which would include detail on the proposed type and mix of residential units for each phase. So as you get into each phase, you can be more responsive to what the market is calling for at that particular time, and sort of anticipate the market. So there's flexibility involved with that. And a mechanism for counting the overall residential development of the development area to ensure that the total residential density does not exceed the total maximum of 6,543, which sounds like a real 543 and not 45 or 42. It was generated based on some number crunching about what would be necessary to support 100,000 square feet of retail. It might be less than that, but what the plan does is it basically caps it. It says in no case would it ever be more than that. And it may be that the market never even comes close to supporting that much. But for now, that's the cap. 100,000 retail is a goal, so we could get more retail, but we could never have more than the cap of 6543. And that was based on the fiscal and economic analyses that we went over when we met with the working group. A couple more, and then we're almost done. The original settlement for the development of the site called for, this has to do with trying to wrap your brain around the density. Currently, the current development agreement is for approximately 2,450 units on 800 acres of the site. That's what's allowed currently. And that works out to 3 dwelling units per acre. The gross density within the entire development area, that big gold area that I mentioned before, which is that 3,822 acres, if you divide that by the 6543, it comes out to 1.7 dwelling units per acre. But when you look about the area that will actually be developed, because right now they're limited as to how much site they can actually develop on. If they're able to get whatever approvals they would need to expand that area, and that would be really in order to be able to reach from Route 70 to Route 37, because their current development area doesn't reach all the way to Route 37. It stops where the disturbance is. You would be able to connect out to Colonial Drive, but we all know that that is not an ideal situation where the high school is. So the goal is to be able to get from 70 to 37 and basically create a boulevard that would connect both ends of town. If that were to happen, then you would need to expand that development area. So that is basically the difference in the density works out to 3.3 dwellings per acre if you do it based on 2,000 acres of allowable development area. And that development area, that includes everything that would be the land bays, town center core, that sort of village center that I was talking about, the boulevard, the long boulevard is actually 5 miles long if it were actually ever happened. That gives you an idea of how big the site is. 5 miles on private property. In the state of New Jersey, it's kind of hard to imagine. Secondary streets that feed the main boulevard, the land base themselves, all the stormwater management areas, internal open spaces, so there'd be open spaces and park space within that 2,000 acres, etc. And then that gets you to the building coverage. Currently in the coastal zone, unless you are a designated center in the CAFRA area, which is the coastal area facility, UAC coastal zone, right now we're in planning area 2 here in Manchester, and the building coverage, or block coverage, is limited to 30% of impervious surface coverage. The goal here is that overall, over the developable area of the site, that 30% would be retained. But within certain land bays, it may fluctuate up or down, so that for any land bay where the coverage would be more than 30%, there would be another land area where the area would be less than 30%. And you know what, I see a hand up in the back. I'll take questions at the end, okay? I just want to keep going through this in the interest of time. And then and that basically, just the last point is that the redevelopment area is contained within a larger parcel, that at the end of the process, if it were all to come about, that at least 5,000 acres would be permanently preserved and enhanced as a natural reserve. So this would all be subject to the review, obviously, review and approval of DEP, and without their authorization, pretty much none of it. So that's basically the overall principles of it. This is just a view of what the zoning map would look like. This is the current Manchester zoning map. You can see that the dotted line represents the redevelopment area, and the largest area, the area that's in gold, that's the RC2, or Retirement Communities -2 zone, is the area that was effectively allowed as a sewer service area, and the area that was allowed for development. That's approximately that 800 acres that we were talking about. In fact, 800 to 1,000 acres that we were talking about before. A lot of the rest of this is in in the FAS, and then there's a piece of the property that's in a highway development free zone. That's the piece that would, the redevelopment area that would link you to 37. So this effectively would become an overlay on top of those zoning districts. Obviously, in order for anything to be developed outside the RC-2, the sewer service area would have to be modified, and there'd be a lot of approvals and permits that would be needed before that could happen. The redevelopment agreement is a contract between the development entity and the developer, as I mentioned before. It's negotiated as a contract. There are minimum requirements in the statute for what a redevelopment agreement must have. For example, one of the mandatory requirements is that there has to be a date for the commencement of the development. There is not a requirement for a date of the completion of the development. And a project like this could take a long time, but it does provide for, and anything other than that can be negotiated. So interim steps could be included in that agreement. It also restricts the transfer from one entity to another. So that has to be controlled, again, with the site this large, so that the municipality always stays in control and always knows who they're dealing with and who to hold accountable for the implementation of the plan. And there's a number of other requirements that have to do with this agreement. And it also requires that they can't adopt a redevelopment plan and do a redevelopment agreement and then develop something that's not in the plan. That would be a violation of the contract and the redevelopment agreement. Time frames for performance, as I mentioned before, there's a requirement that there be provisions for resolving disputes. Sometimes when in this process, anybody that's ever read the paper, and I'm going back a couple decades now, the things that happen in places like Asbury Park, wherever, where redevelopment seems to be taking a long time. Even cities like New Brunswick, where you go down to downtown New Brunswick now, and all of that development that you see now, the majority of it has been done through redevelopment plans, and they've been evolving over periods of many, many years. So sometimes disputes will happen between the redevelopment entity and the redeveloper, and this agreement provides for how you resolve those disputes. So it's a pretty complex document. It takes a little bit of effort, time to negotiate one, but that's a step in the future. And then obviously project completion. At some point, if the project were ever to be built, completely built out, and probably none of us may not, I know, there's a process that kind of brings closure to it. And the way the statute does that is, as each project is built and inspected and approved by the township, there's a mechanism called a certificate of completion. It almost sounds like a certificate of compliance or a certificate of zoning compliance, but it's different. It's required by the statute, and it would basically be saying this property is no longer in need of redevelopment, it's been redeveloped. And it can be done project by project by project. So over time, at some point, the area would no longer be in need of redevelopment. At least that's the way that the statute contemplates it to work. And then really what this does is it provides for a public-private partnership. That's really what the redevelopment does in a nutshell. As far as this is where I'll be concluding really with the board, because the board's primary job tonight is to indicate whether they feel the redevelopment plan that they've been reviewing is consistent with the master plan. And this is really just a synopsis of a little bit of what I've already mentioned, which is at the time that the last comprehensive master plan done, when the whole master plan was updated at one time, was in 2011. The 1,000 acres or 800 to 1,000 acres of the redevelopment area was zoned for a planned retirement community. So that's kind of where we started. The master plan was updated through a re-examination report, which is one way that it's kept current. The re-examination report is required to be done under the municipal legislation at minimum once every 10 years. And there was one done on it was adopted April 6, 2015, so a little more than a year ago. And that noted the designation of the redevelopment area, which had occurred the year before. It occurred after 2011, but before 2015. Then lastly, this particular year, on March 7th, the addendum to the master plan that was adopted into the master plan made note that the working group had been formed and it was working on a town center approach. So based on that sequence, my representation to the board is that you can find that the plan is consistent with the master plan. And that, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, sorry, conclude my presentation.
Thank you.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we've been having some problems with our sound system. That beeping that you heard, that is so annoying. If you're up here, you can hear it. We're going to try to correct that, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Not that we see 5 minutes, because the part of the system that isn't functioning is the part that the public will have to speak into. We're trying to get an accurate recording of all this. It's all being recorded.
Go through all the, or not?
I'm asking you all stay quiet.
Don't worry.
Is it working?
No, just 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, but please don't leave your seats because it'll take us 15 minutes to get you back. We haven't really solved the problem, but we substituted a microphone for public comment. So we law books Okay, let me just, before we start public comment, just indicate that, as I indicated before, this is not an adversary proceeding. The only thing this board is going to do tonight is to make a recommendation, one way or the other, to the Township Council. The battle, if you will be joined before the council on a second reading of the ordinance. That is where cross-examination and other witnesses can be introduced by those who are either in favor of or against this redevelopment plan. Our function is only recommendatory, as I said. It is not adversarial. So at this point, we're going to invite public comments. Let me make a couple of comments about public comments. We have indicated in our agenda that we'll stay here until 11 o'clock tonight. And that's pretty good for a bunch of volunteers and the professionals like me who are paid. Hopefully, when people make comments, they're not going to be repetitious. In other words, you're not going to get up and say the same thing that the last three people said. We'd like everyone to identify themselves by name and where they live. And if you have heard comments that mirror your comments from a previous speaker, just say, if you don't mind, I agree what the previous speaker had said, either for or against this redevelopment plan. That way everybody will get heard, they'll be of record, but we won't sit here listening to the same stuff all night, because at the end of the evening, this board is charged with the responsibility under the redevelopment law of making a recommendation one way or the other, and we intend to do that. So with that having been said, Madam Chair, I would ask that members of the public who want to speak probably line up down the center aisle and make their comments. We want to need your name and your address.
Don't have to do anything.
Just speak.
No.
You might want to speak louder to the people in the back.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, hello. My name is Jamie Zachariah, and I'm here on behalf of the New Jersey Sierra Club. And on behalf of the club, we are urging you to deny this recommendation for this plan because we feel that it is the wrong project in the wrong place. We believe that this city, or so it would be, is way too large to put in the middle of the Pinelands. That 16,000 plus new residents is way too much development for such an area. We're worried about the destruction of more and more open space in our most environmentally sensitive area, the water pollution that would come from it, the runoff, the air pollution from the increased vehicles that would come both during the construction and once people have moved there, and especially because how close to the Barnegat Bay it is, which we all know is incredibly impaired already, and all of that pollution is going to go right into the bay, especially with the issues you have in the area with the contaminations that would just be capped. And that's a whole other issue because we all know caps fail and what happens if those contaminants get out, We're worried about the aquifer and streams and wetlands being dried out with water being taken from the area and construction. And when you move water around, you get increased flooding in some areas and not enough water in other areas, and especially in a water-dependent ecosystem such as the Pinelands, as it can create a lot of issues, as I'm sure you all know. We're also worried about taxpayers who are going to have to end up to pay more because of all the increased municipality support that's going to have to be built, the amount of school children, the 2 million plus gallons of sewage a day that are going to be added, and the sewer lines are going to have to creep all out of the new development, further destroying open space and important streams and wetlands in the Pinelands. And lastly, we are very concerned that this is going to be used as an excuse to propagate the building of the Southern Reliability Link pipeline and other pipelines that might come around, that not only continue the fossil fuel addiction we have, but destroy even more open space and put even more people along the route at risks. So we hope that when you consider the development, you also look at the surrounding infrastructure, such as the pipeline, that will come into it. So thank you for hearing what I have to say.
Jamie, just two things. What is your office? What office do you hold with Sierra Club?
Outreach coordinator.
I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
Outreach coordinator,
Outreach coordinator, and where's your office?
Trenton.
Can you give us the address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. 145 West Hanover Street, Trenton, MJ 08618.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Argenti. I live at 61 Clear Lake Road in Whitney. I have a copy of the letter that I'm going to read. Please accept these comments as objections to the 2016 Manchester Town Center redevelopment plan, and I would appreciate notice of any and all decisions your board makes on this matter. Generally, this plan is incomplete and flawed in 1, describing the existing conditions, 2, reviewing the impact on the Barnegat Bay and Pinelands watershed, including the streams, water bodies, and public drinking water supply, and 3, making assumptions about town ground growth that are not based on our community's public vision or even any discussion. Here are my specific comments. Sprawl. Your report claims that the redevelopment plan is providing alternatives to sprawl by planning for and crafting new communities of place. 6,000 units is sprawl, and building new commercial and industrial space does not respond to the apparent existing sprawl. Economic development. Your report states that it is expected that a higher quality and greater density of goods and services will be available to residents than is currently found in the strip developments that characterize the Route 9 corridor. Well, Route 9 is miles away and in another town. Many residents shop in Manchester, appreciate those stores, and wonder about the vacant stores on the same developer's property, by the way. 3, environmental protection. Your report states the extensive contamination of the soil and groundwater at this site will be remediated as a result of this project. Endangered habitats, wetlands, and other environmentally sensitive features on the site will be preserved. Why hasn't the property owner preserved it to date? Why are we rewarding negligence? 4, objectives. How will this plan improve environmental quality? Where are the remediation studies? Can the public review historic uses for the property? What other objectives will be achieved? 5, alternatives. What other alternatives have you explored? Have you prepared an environmental impact statement on the existing conditions? Exactly how damaged is the land and the water? How will that be remediated? Who will monitor that remediation? Drinking water. Are you aware of the Toms River and its streams that are on the 303 impaired list? What is the impact of this project on our drinking water? How much drinking water will the redevelopment plan use? Is there an adequate amount of drinking water for the plan? 7, stormwater. In addition to these questions, there is no mention of the need for stormwater management plans for the construction, design, and maintenance of the infrastructure needed for any of these new facilities. Thank you for your time and consideration. Please respond with your comments.
Thank you.
William Locke, 13 Verona Drive, Manchester. I just have one question regarding the 6,543 residences. In essence, how many bedrooms would there be total with those residences? To give us an idea as to how many children might be impacted in the school district.
Madam Chair, would you like to respond?
Yes, please.
I'm going to try to share my challenge. Really, there's no actual, although there was a fiscal impact study that made some assumptions about bedrooms and school costs and all of that, which the working group went into great detail and review. At this point, the plan it's so far ahead of whatever actual site plan could come down, there's really no way of predicting the bedroom count to be exact. But what the redevelopment agreement will do, though, is as a project like that will get closer and closer to becoming a reality, those fiscal impact requirements will be updated. Because one of the things that the town made perfectly clear and the working group was really focusing on was trying to make sure, as much as could possibly be done this early stage of the process, that there would not be a negative fiscal impact on the township. And that primarily falls on the school system. And that's one of the reasons why the superintendent is part of the working group, so that we could have his input while we were deliberating on that. So I can't give you a specific answer as to the number of bedrooms at this early stage. That's something that we won't know until if and when we ever get to a point where we actually see a developed site.
All right, so in essence, I can't get an answer to the question then,
I
right?
can't, not in 2016 when this project may not be built until the
16,000.
Renaissance Community, 30 Boston Drive, Manchester, New Jersey. I have an issue with the town council meeting regarding this project, regarding comments that were made by Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates commented that we're all going to be dead. I think that we should have him resign his position immediately because he's biased against us. He's not having any impact on helping us. He's a liability to the board, and he thinks it's funny. And I think that his resignation should be effective immediately.
Well, that's not really speaking to the issue. If you
Yes,
want
it
to
is,
speak to the
because
issue-
if you're voting on something, then the board, and he's part of the board, then he's part of the problem. So it is addressing the issue.
Thank you.
That's it?
That's it?
Oh. Okay.
My name is Laurel Arrington. I live in the Meadows, 24 Meadows Lane in Whiting. My main concern is the ground that you want to build this empire on. Is it clean? What condition is the soil in? And you say there are 2 lakes. They have to be dredged. Someone has to find out what condition the ground is before you even entertain any idea of building. That's the main thing. We don't want another Sivagati. That's right. The way it infected the groundwater in Tom's River. Also, you can make the developer have to pay and build any schools that would be needed. And I think they did that in Howell. The developer for Candlewood put in 4 elementary schools when he wanted to build there. But this whole idea, I'm not for it. I think it's wrong. One thing we could do is to clean up the ground, all the water, and give it back to the animals.
My name is Anthony J. Cody. I live at 450 Coolidge Avenue, Whiting, New Jersey. My concern is this gentleman here gave us a very nice speech with a lot of time. But he also pointed out in the speech that it took me a year of study to be able to present that speech tonight. So my question to you is, why did we need to conceal the fact that this study was going on for a year? This should have been seen the light of day a long time ago.
If you listen to Dave Roberts' presentation, he outlined how long this has been going on and that there was a master plan reexamination over a year ago. There was the first steps were taken by this board and the council. It's all been of record. Nobody's hiding anything here. It's quite
I've
transparent.
been in the Manchester Times.
Well, we don't run the newspaper. Whatever we have to notice under the municipal land use law and the redevelopment law has been properly noticed.
The other question that comes up is my section of Whiting, I live in Roosevelt City. It's well watered, and the young lady brought up an interesting point about the water table. Are we sure that my well won't be affected?
That's something which will have to be determined. We're a long way from anything.
Liability, sir.
We are a long way from anything that is even going to look like development. And at the point at which there are development applications before this board, those are the issues. Those issues have to be addressed, because they must be. And they must be addressed at the DEP level as well. All of this property is within the CAFRA area, is that correct, Dave? So this is going to need CAFRA permits for all of the environmental issues.
Want to include in your ordinance something when this ultimately gets approved about
Every
what
single-
happens if somebody's property is affected.
Every single resolution that this board has ever adopted for any project in the CAFRA area is subject to CAFRA approval. Without a CAFRA approval, it never gets built. I cannot address the liability issue. I would.
Will the developer be forced to have an insurance policy against such a?
I don't know the answer to that.
Somebody's writing a contract. I worked for government, so I know contracts get written by people.
That we are at least a year or two away from a contract, and every single draft of that contract will be public record. So I would suggest to you that you just keep on top of it and keep asking those questions. But our role tonight is only recommendatory, and it doesn't get into the weeds of who's insuring what for whom. That comes later, but it will be addressed.
Thank you for being candid with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Darren Burke. I live at 662A Ingham Court in Manchester. I agree with most of what's been said here already, and I just want to let I'm against this. For one, I don't think we need any more retail space in Manchester. I don't think we're going to bring in any retail giant that isn't already available in the area. I don't think we need any more houses. We have a few developments that are still in the building phases that are not being built up very fast. One is the Reserve in Whiting that I saw, and another is, I forget, something point over here by the base entrance. Okay? And if you look at these areas and you look at what they do to these areas, they come in, they strip out all the trees, and then they build slowly, one house at a time. So the house sells, they build another one. So what happens is the land gets stripped of all the beautiful trees and all the trees that are helping the water, and what gets left is nothing. And I don't think Manchester really has the demand for this kind of housing, for this kind of shopping. I don't think it necessitates it. And if you've ever been back there, and I've been back there over most of that area, it's quite beautiful back there. Mother Nature has been redeveloping that area for decades now, and she's doing a really good job. And I want to thank you. I thank you guys for all your time and all your effort, because I know you're volunteers and you don't deserve to be picked on for anything. But as a planning board, maybe instead of planning a bigger Manchester, we could plan a brighter Manchester, where we mandate the use of recirculating water. In other words, gray water recirculation systems where we use the water that we wash our hands in to flush our toilets. Maybe we could become not the biggest city around, but we could become the greenest. Maybe that would be the best way to plan our future. Thank you for your time.
My name is Raven Petoskey.
Spell your last name, please.
Potosky, 4 Mount Misery Road, Manchester Township. I have a petition here for Mayor Palmer in opposition to this neighborhood. I spoke at the last meeting, as well as another full house. Everyone spoke in opposition to this plan, and I see you guys have been working really hard since the last meeting to push for this plan. So you're really not listening to the voting citizens of this town, which is a disappointment to me. And this whole, quote, redevelopment, you don't do that on Wilderness. Yes, you do that in Asbury Park. Yes, you do that in New Brunswick. You don't do that on open space. That's not redevelopment. Just appalled that you're taking a plan 6,443 homes plus commercial property. It's appalling to me. I'm blown away by it. And here's the petition. I hope that
If it's directed to the mayor, you should probably take it to the mayor's office.
It's right here.
He's right here. I'll hand it to him.
Hello, my name is Joseph Giuliano, 7 Oakland Road, Legion Oak. My question is one, presentation tonight. I'd like to have a hard copy in the same way it was presented. Is it available?
I think it was available on the website, right?
Yeah, it is on the website, is that correct, David?
No, I'm not computer oriented.
Okay.
I'm 88,
Well.
pass me by.
You're not alone.
That's a copy for you. Thank you very much.
My name is Gloria Byrne. I'm from 20 Wood Spring Lane in Whiting, New Jersey. What I'd like to say to you is that we have vacant stores in Whiting, New Jersey, and vacant stores on 70. And the reason they're vacant is because they've raised the rents, and this is Haldanian-owned stores. And I don't know why he's raising the rents. Is it because he wants to build these stores in the heritage place here? Maybe that's why he's raising the rents. These store owners had to leave because they couldn't afford the stores in these strip malls. And that's why they had to leave. They couldn't afford it. You know, they were only making it in these stores, and they couldn't afford it. And that's why they had to leave. You know, they lived on a very slim margin. And I was talking to the owners of stores that were still there, and they're only making it. And that's a shame that they're just making it. And it's a shame that these store owners had to leave. It's not right. It's not right for those store owners that had to leave. And now they're going to try to put new stores. How many stores are you going to try to put in there? And they're hidden. They're going to be hidden behind Route 70. How many people are going to have to go in there to make these stores survive? How many people are going to have to go back there to make these stores survive? I don't know if they're going to make it. Are they going to be able to make it? And how many people are going to have to go back there to buy these houses? How many houses are you going to want to put back there? How many people are going to want to go back there to buy these houses? I don't think that's going to make it. I don't think this plan is any good. And the pollution that's in the ground there, it's just capped. You know what capped means? Capped means it can come up. I have a master's in environmental protection, environmental management rather. I know what cap means. Cap means it can just come up off the ground. And then all that stuff comes up. What do you want to happen to us? You want pollution to come up and to pollute all of us? And to pollute our groundwater? I know what pollution means. I have a master's in it. I know what pollution means. So I think you should think, all of you up there, you should think once, twice, 3, 4 times before you vote for this plan. So really think about it before you vote for this plan.
Give somebody else a chance, please.
My name is Tom Clarico, 12 Como Court, Manchester. I have a question for town planner, and I have a few comments and suggestions.
Can you talk about
Yeah, I have a question for the town planner. Okay, it's a little low.
Yeah, so please do, yes, thank you.
Okay, can you take a moment? I have a question for our planner, and then I also have a comment to make, a suggestion. The question I have, I think it's a critical one. I'm a little late to this issue, so you may forgive some of my ignorance about this. The concept for town center, the whole idea of the concept, did it originate with Hobson, with the property owner? Was it, where was its genesis, its birth? Who came up with the idea for a town center?
I'll attempt to answer the question. Actually, I believe that the genesis probably started, my tenure with the township goes back to the beginning of last year. I believe that the idea came originally from the designation of the area. The reason, probably one of the reasons why the area was designated was there was a thought about this as an alternative to another retirement community in Manchester, partly because of some of the economic forces at work. So all I know is that when the working group began to meet last year and I became engaged with the working group, that the idea of the town center was already effectively on the table. As far as where it originated from, I believe it effectively predated my involvement with the township. So, sorry, that's the best I can do.
Okay, that puts me in the category with the other gentleman that was up here, one of the first people, and that is that we don't have a clear answer from you because of your tenure at the time. Okay, that's understandable. Does anyone up here, can anyone answer that question? I think it's critical because I paid very close attention to your presentation, and I saw the words on the screen, and it said statutory process. That's right. Statutory, and it also said that the concept or the ideas for the development or the redevelopment have to come from the township governing body or the planning board or another entity designated by the township governing body. Is that right? I did pay attention. Okay.
Great job.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. So to me, that's critical. If we're talking statutory, Counselor, then I think that it's critical that we all know, that everyone should know, that you should all know, if we're following statutory procedure to the letter.
I can assure you that we are, and we're very fortunate to have Dave Roberts as our planner, because he wrote the treatise and the book that are used throughout New Jersey for redevelopment projects. So he is the expert in New Jersey, recognized as such by the League of Municipalities.
This gentleman here.
Yes.
But, and with all due respect, and that is commendable, he couldn't answer.
The question you asked was, what was the genesis of the town center?
Is it from the property owner, the developer, or is it from the governing body or the planning board?
It originally came from the planning board very early on, several years ago. The area between the high school and this area here, Colonial Drive and 37, was originally conceived as a town center area. It never got built. So we've always been looking for a town center on the other side of 37. And this property that is being considered now is property which was an old mining site, which was stripped and mined. That's how, those lakes aren't natural lakes. Those lakes were dug out over the course of many, many years by the American Spelling and Refining Company to find some, what were they called? A rare earth?
Gilmanite.
Yeah, certain rare minerals or something.
Right, yeah, and that's how this property got denuded. So at this point, we have the town center concept, which has been around in Manchester in various iterations for probably the last 15 years. I've been planning board attorney for 26 years. And now there's an opportunity to take it to a place, again, all theoretical, where it can redevelop property that is just a mess, right? There are some environmental issues having to do with tailings that were mildly radioactive. That's being remediated now. It's not part of this area that's proposed for development. There's also an area that was that had an oil spill on it when ASNR had this property that was mining it. That's also under remediation. That's not included in this area either, to my knowledge, Dave. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But yeah, so, this is not, don't get the idea that this is a, forest full of, birds and deer and all that.
No, it's visible, you can see it when you go,
Yeah,
you go on the internet, you can look at the site. Well, it's scarred.
So that's how the concept of redevelopment of this came about, just like the concept of redevelopment came about in slums in Asbury Park that were pretty much destroyed during the riots in 1967 and 68. That's the purpose of redevelopment, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so you've answered my question. This is something that's been discussed for 15 years, to your knowledge, like 15 years back?
Not on this particular site, but the town center concept has been in our master plan for a long period of time.
Thank you. So thank you for the time, and I realize that it's not all my time speaking, that it's the answers we get. Okay, so I'll be really quick now. The suggestion I have is based on some of the prior speakers here. We've had some good speakers tonight. And one gentleman, I think he had a leather vest on. I think it was he who said how Mother Nature is doing a pretty good job of regrowing some of that site. You can see that in some of the aerial photographs. One of my suggestions is in light of what we've seen happen at Great Adventure, and also in light of what a developer, a very successful developer, has done in Ocean County, in southern Ocean County, with a landfill that had to be remediated. There were problems, and then put in a complete solar farm. This is a housing builder and developer. And you may know who I'm talking about, Walters Group. So this site might be an excellent site. Just a suggestion to the property owner, if they're present, I don't know if they're in the room, or I know the mayor may be in the room, I heard, might be an alternative. There's been people talking about nature and order and the forest and the trees, and in the case of Great Adventure, the debate was whether to cut down so many acres of trees to put panels up. Here, you might not have to do that. It may be already scarred, and once it can be cleaned up and remediated, I think it could be a winner for the region, for the town, and for the property owner, and certainly for the environment and the world. Thank you.
Marilyn Miller from Tom's River chose not to be in the room while other people were talking. I was outside enjoying the beautiful weather. If the township approves this, I don't know if anybody's already said this, I may be redundant, township must provide more services. The amount of police is not going to be sufficient. The volunteer first aid squads will need full-timers. Your CUNY library will need to be either rebuilt, higher, maybe, such as what happens in Tom's River. Your police station, I believe, is in the back there. That's not going to be sufficient. Your town hall. So you're talking about town center. I'm wondering, is this a gift maybe? All these facilities are going to go over to the town center. I don't know. But all the services will need to be increased. In addition, Route 70 is gonna need a barrier. Those rumble strips are not gonna be sufficient. You know how many people have been killed already on Route 70? It is a disaster. So you're gonna have, the township is going to have to confer with DOT, and it'll take forever, yes, see, she's shaking her head, to get a barrier such as on 32nd right now, because it's needed, it's gonna be needed. So many services. In addition to that, it's gonna push out people in the service area who can't afford to live around here anymore. That's happened in so many towns. They can't live there. So I hope the township is aware that this is gonna happen, or it may not be here when this all goes on. And of course, don't forget how long it has taken Sibagati's situation. It's still not resolved. This is not a good idea. I'm against it.
I don't think there's an analogy to being able to see Sibagati there. There is significant pollution under the ground, which will probably, I think it's been, because I was involved with Ocean County Citizens for Clean Water way back when we fought Sibagati, and I think that was about 30 years ago, and they're still pumping the water out from underneath the ground and treating it, and it will probably be another 30 years before that property can ever be used again. Fortunately, we don't have that situation here. We have some rather insignificant areas that are contaminated, slightly contaminated, which are being remediated. That problem, Sibagati's problem, is a groundwater problem that is way beyond anything that exists in this town.
Absolutely, and in the beginning it was ignored. This site still is a problem. And I'm thinking about a developer up there in Monmouth County that recently took soil from the site and dumped it with sand and dumped it on the beach up here in Monmouth County. Who's going to monitor where all this is going? And then after all that soil has been trucked away to wherever, now there has to be soil put there. I'm against it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patty Caruso. I live in Brainstown. I am here tonight on behalf of what used to be Responsible Pipeline Group, now People Over Pipeline. I don't know if the people in this room or how many of the people in Manchester are aware that there's a proposed compressor station that would start in Chesterfield and go approximately 28 to 30 miles. It would go right in front of my house. I live in a tranquil, idyllic setting out in the country, and the ending point would be Manchester. This pipeline is so huge. It is 30 inches in diameter and has 721 pounds per square inch
Is this natural gas?
of natural gas, the Southern Reliability Link. The ending point is Manchester.
Where?
I don't know exactly where in Manchester.
Where Colonial Drive. Colonial Drive. Colonial and 70, where the green fence is. Yes.
No.
Right here. Right
No,
here.
next to
Please
the
don't
first
call
aid
out.
building.
Well, I'm answering the question. You didn't know the answer. I'm sorry. I was trying to help.
So,
I don't know that.
our concern, and I'm not a resident of Manchester, but I'm a resident that lives along the pipeline route, that if this were to explode, it would have disastrous effects. Our well water can be contaminated. The majority of people along the pipeline route do have wells. They would do horizontal drilling that would affect aquatic life, animals, the huge trees that are several hundred years old on our street would all be killed. And we suspect that this pipeline...
I understand your concern about the pipeline,
But
but the
would
pipeline
we-
is not going through this property that I know of, and I would suggest that you bring your concerns to the council so that the council can maybe take action. to block any pipeline or?
We have met with council for the past 10 months in Upper Freehold, in Bordentown, in Chesterfield, Monmouth Freeholders, Burlington Freeholders, but it's ending in Manchester and could potentially impact this huge development that you're proposing.
Okay,
So
let
that's
the
what I'd like to
let
say.
the town council know about that, because it'll be the town council that will have to determine whether or not they're going to, in essence, adopt your position and try to. We don't have any jurisdiction on that. We're just dealing with a development plan that we're just simply asked to recommend, or not recommend, to the township council. That's why we're here tonight.
I understand that, but this would be ending here in Manchester with the potential
Please
of...
go to the township council and make them aware of that. That's the proper basis.
My name is Kathleen Comer, and I live at 97C Old Road, Whiting. I'm just here tonight, I'm very short, very simple. I'm totally against this. I think the first woman from the Sierra Club who spoke, she articulated perfectly everything that I think. I think the environmental impact would be devastating in this area. The water supply, our aquifer, I worry about that. I worry about the contamination. I worry about the tailings, radioactive tailings. Radioactivity doesn't just go away, and who is monitoring this? Who is the one who is...
It's being monitored by a federal agency and by the DEP, is that correct, Dave? Yeah.
But I've walked those woods. Those woods are beautiful. That lake is beautiful, man-made or not, polluted or not. I just don't want to see more clear cutting. I moved here because I love the area, because there's open space, and life is good here. And I don't want to see more crowds and more roads being built and more schools being built, because you're going to have to build so much. And I realize everybody's already said that, so that's all. I just want to say I'm totally against this.
Hi, my name is Liz Choker, 1241 Birmingham Avenue. I just want, and no, I'm Park. I want to say that I am for any thoughts that you have to lowering the taxes. I am 100% against more senior housing because I know that that will strongly affect my taxes. And I like listening to all the different ideas. And I also appreciate that there's many steps that have to be followed and many steps that need time for approval, where one step is approved and one step may not be approved. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, it's going on quite well. I have one question. Has this application been reviewed by our environmental commission? And if so, what were the results?
It's not an application.
This is not an application. It is a redevelopment plan that is being put in the form of an ordinance and sent to us for recommendation.
Well, even the plan, has the plan been submitted to Township?
I don't believe, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe under the redevelopment law that there is a requirement that you put an environmental commission.
No, there's no role for the environmental commission, although sometimes environmental commission members are represented on the planning board. I don't believe that's the case here in Manchester, but certainly the governing body can use the commission as an advisory group if they choose to, but it's not a required step in the process.
Right, so that's something that maybe you want to take up with the town council when they get this back.
Thank you.
I'm the Executive Director of Save Barnegat Bay. Our address is 725B Mansaloging Road, Brick Township, New Jersey 08723. We are a 45-year-old citizen organization born right here in Ocean County who has worked to protect and restore the beautiful Barnegat Bay. As you know, it is a Category 1 estuary that also has a national estuary program here for some 25 years. Our members are very much opposed to this proposed development plan. And in the past, we have worked with, for example, over those 45 years, Berkeley Township in fighting the New Jersey pulverizing plant, which was a Cahoonian project for 4,500 homes, which was then reduced to 1,600 homes, which last year was the largest purchase for open space in Ocean County's history, some 775 acres. So you can pick an alternate plan for this property, and I think you should. We're very much opposed to this extensive development, the impacts it will have on Barney Bay. Thank you.
My name is Marion Goldberg. I live at 17 Marlow Avenue, Manchester. And in listening to proposals that have been put forward here tonight, which is different than the last meeting, which was kind of chaotic, and in listening to recommendations that have been made, I have a twofold question. What happened to the September 2003 provisions in the lawsuit that deemed that this property was not to be developed?
Well, first of all, there was a development provision in that settlement. And as this plan clearly indicates, both as to any settlement that impacted this property or had to do with this property, whether it's in state court or in federal court, those settlements will have to be amended before this project or anything like this redevelopment project can go forward.
And have to be addressed again?
Yes, yes.
I have a recommendation that you might want to consider. I was on that property this past week, and I didn't go too far on the dirt road because I had to rent a car and said, you know, not smart. But you have railroads there. You have a means for transportation by rail. And instead of, or as a beginning process for something well into the future, you need to consider about developing transportation for the people that live out in this area. If you have a railroad station that you built there and utilize the railroad tracks that are already there, you would then have people able to park and travel to Red Bank on rail, get on a different train and go to New York City. You would have a means to go to the Philadelphia, the airport in Philadelphia. Right now, if you fly into Philadelphia, there is no transportation, nothing. You can't get on a bus. You can't take a taxi because you leave half your arm with the driver. You have no public way of getting from there. But if you took that as the initial part to start your area to develop, you now have a means for people in this area to get around. Right now, all they can do is drive east or west on 70. And then get to the Parkway, and then get to Philadelphia, but you have nothing else to disperse the people that are living here. And yes, we all like the environment that is here, which is why we moved here in the first place. I would say 90% of the people that are here, we consider they came from over the bridge in Raritan. And they came from over the bridge in Raritan because they were like sardines up there.
Yes. You're not the first one to suggest that the bridges over the Raritan should be blown up.
But we chose to come and live this way. We don't need a town center. We do need it for taxation, but we don't need it for people, as someone already said. There's empty stores, there's empty places. You're building things that are not suitable for what our needs are. After you have a railroad train station with access, then you can work on industry coming in, using the railroad lines to bring in their products to build something here. You could get General Motors. You could get somebody like that to sell cars. That's what you should look at. Instead of bringing in the people that will have no jobs, and the only way to get to the job would be to go on 70 one way or 70 the other.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you very much.
May I ask one question?
Well, you've already had your opportunity. We're trying to end this.
I'll get that. Just a real quick question.
No, not without bringing up to the microphone.
I appreciate it. Real quick question.
I didn't mean to be rude to you, but I just want to make it clear that I said there would be no calling out tonight.
Okay.
This is not a football game.
I appreciate that. Sorry. My apologies. My question has,
Give us your name again for the
Derek Burke, 662A, Ingham Court, Manchester. My question has to do with 70. Now, with the influx, some 6,400 some odd residential units, Route 70 would have to be widened from Tom's River at least to 539 in Whiting, if not to 530 in Pemberton, where it veers off towards Deborah. Was that discussed in the working group? And did they also discuss about talking to Community Hospital or Deborah Hospital about expanding their emergency room services?
Yes, please.
Actually, did you answer your first question? Sure. To answer the first question, yes, we actually had 1 or 2 sessions just on traffic impacts. There was, you might have noticed, about a year ago, I think they had counters out on both 37 and 70 to count existing traffic on both roads. So there was an initial analysis done. As the plan would be developed, that analysis would have to get into a great deal more detail. But I think it's fair to say that there would be a number of traffic improvements that would be required, both on the 37 side and the 70 side, to accommodate a project of this size. And how those would be implemented and how they'd be phased in would probably depend on how the project phased in. But yes, there's definitely going to have to be infrastructure improvements. And your second part of your question was about the discussion with Deborah. There wasn't any specific mention of Deborah, but there was, since the director of both the Public Works and the director of Utilities were participants in all of those meetings, the idea of having services on site, like emergency management services and public safety services and those things, was definitely part of it. I think it was actually written into the plan. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Ann Markowski, 17 Milton Drive, Manchester. I guess I'm a little amazed at how many conclusions we're already at, when my understanding was this is the beginning of a plan, that we don't have substantive numbers. I think there's a whole lot of work that has to go to blow out this plan to become real. I believe it's the fiscal responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility of the township to evaluate the property and to come up with a plan that's workable. And that's what the purpose of this discussion is. So while I encourage people to voice their opinion, I think it's important that we understand there's also a fiscal responsibility and a cost-benefit analysis has to be done before you can move ahead with anything substantive. So I think this is just the first step in a process of analysis. And I think we need to be patient and work through the process and understand what it's really about.
My name is Paul Leodori. I'm the attorney for the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, and my office is in Medford, New Jersey. Oops. Okay, great. One of the things I wanted to mention tonight is, I don't know who said it, that this is not an adversarial procedure.
That's correct. I said it.
And with all due deference, Mr. Liston, you're absolutely, positively, 100% wrong. Tonight, this is an adversarial procedure.
No, it's not.
It's the...
Look, you're not going to argue with me. We are making a recommendation. The adversarial proceeding takes place at the council meeting on second reading. You know that.
No, sir, I beg to differ. And let me explain why. And again, it's not a football game, so I understand we don't yell out at football games or planning board games.
So we do yell out at football games, we don't at planning board.
Oh, okay. I wish you would learn that. But maybe we should go to the football game together. So anyway, The reality is, every man, woman, and child, lover of the environment, who lives near or in Manchester Township, that's on one side. And it's an adversarial proceeding against Hobson's. That's right, Hobson's. And the reason I say that is because history has proven what I say to be correct. It is naive for any and all of you to think this is not adversarial. It's adversarial because in the year 2000, Hobson sued Berkeley Township and other communities, I think this community as well, over the Heritage Minerals site. In 2001, in state court. In 2001, Hobson sued the Department of Environmental Protection, the Pinelands Commission, the DEP, over the Heritage Minerals site. In 2001 or 2, they filed 2 more lawsuits in the administrative law courts against the DEP. They sued. They're not any different than other large developers. Perhaps in one respect, they have a lot more money. They have a lot more money than Manchester Township. And my words of wisdom to you is look at who you're going to go to bed with here. Because if you side with Hobson's tonight, you are siding with the devil. Because they are. They're going to come back. The reason I say that is we all heard about the 2003 federal court order in action that was entered with Hobson. You know what Hobson promised in that? They promised we're only going to have 2,400 homes.
Right.
They promised 20,000 commercial square feet. They promised to protect certain endangered species. They promised, they promised, they promised. And you know what they said in that? They promised to relinquish and dismiss the litigation with Pinelands. They promised to stop litigating with DEP. They promised. And you know what it says? Paragraph 10. Aside from the project authorized herein, no other use of the heritage mineral property or the development area is permitted. That's what they promised. They promised in 2003 no more. All they did is they got a foothold, a toehold, and now you're going to let them in the door. You know what? If you read the New York Times, you know what's going on in the South China Sea? They took a coral reef, and for about 8 months, they continued to dump and pave it over. It's now a naval base for the Chinese Air Force. That's what's going on here. You're letting these guys into Manchester Township, and that's why it's an adversarial proceeding. Because if you think that's a good idea, you're wrong. I have seen towns get eaten up alive with litigation costs, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at 20 years of litigation with Hobson's, because they make a deal and they break the deal, and that's what they're going to do for the next 20 years. My advice to you is you have a federal consent order. Ride it, baby. And the reason you should ride it is because you want to be in league with the DEP. You don't want to be against the DEP, you want to be with the DEP. You want to be in league with the Department of the Interior. You don't want to be fighting the Department of the Interior. You want to be in league with the Pinelands Commission. You don't want to be fighting the Pinelands Commission. Pick your ally. Tonight is the night to pick your ally. And pick the right ally. Do not pick the wrong ally. You remember Neville Chamberlain? I brought peace in my time. He picked the wrong ally. He picked Adolf Hitler. Don't pick Adolf Hitler. Pick the right ally.
No, you're not, because if you were, you would have read the plan and you would see that this plan cannot ever go forward unless that federal court order is amended to reflect this plan.
That it doesn't say that. And you should send it to the planning board, or you should send it to the mayor and council saying exactly those words, Mr. Liston, and all of you. That is so critical.
That's what the plan says, and anything that is in that court order that you're slamming down and yelling about has to be altered by consent or by a judicial order before this plan can go forward. David, am I correct?
There's, the plan cannot alter the settlement agreement. So there's plenty of language in the plan that references the settlement agreement. If the board suggests, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for the board to recommend that it be crystal clear in the plan.
Sure.
But it's already referenced in several locations in the plan that obviously without a larger shared service area, the plan really hinges on the road that would connect 37 to 7. That's what makes it either happen or not happen. So many things have to happen which require DEP approval for that to happen that, obviously the settlement agreement is part of that. So the redevelopment agreement would have to be based on a new settlement agreement. All of those things hinge on that. So by making it, if it's not as clear as it should be, we can certainly state it again.
We will emphasize it, Mr. Leodori, and I think, and I agree with you, that court order cannot be changed in any way, shape, or form without your group. Are you a party to that?
Yes, the Pinelands Preservation.
Well, then, to quote you, sir,
that's correct.
take that order and ride it, baby, ride it. Because you won that. You won that, and we are not about to disturb that whatsoever unless and until the court says, yes, you may do that. And we know that you will be in that courtroom, probably being as loud as you were this evening, telling the court they shouldn't do that. And that's your right. But this function of this board tonight, with all due respect to your presentation, is not an adversarial proceeding. We're being asked to perform a statutory duty which is non-binding on the council, and that's what we intend to do.
No, and I appreciate that, but I do appreciate the comments, actually by yourself, Mr. Liston, and others. I think it's so critical for you folks and for us to all be on the same side here, because when you give up leverage to a bigger, powerful entity like Hobson's, or any developer, Hobson's got a ton of money. When you give up a little leverage, you lose a lot. There's thousands of acres out there, thousands of acres that they're going to use as leverage. They're going to play a game, and they're going to use that as the bait to get more development, more density, more something in the future. Some things that we can't even think about. And what I'm saying is, keep the game small. Keep it within what we have together. We all have together. We all have that common interest. Keep the bigger guns, the DEP Pinelands and the interior on our side. Don't surrender that, because if you surrender that, you're giving up. And again, Mr. Liston, what you're saying, I think you and I agree. I know as painful as that may sound to you and me, we agree. And let's, the town planner.
We agree that this plan cannot move forward unless and until a federal court changes that order. You've got that order. You are in that case. You tell me. Your Pinelands Preservation Alliance is a party to that case, and you will be there, I am sure, hammer and tongs, trying to prevent one word of that order from ever being changed. And would you agree that if that order is never changed, all this never happens?
I hope so.
Well, okay.
And
ride it, baby, ride it.
Would you agree that there's no harm in taking up Mr. Roberts' kind offer again on behalf of the board to put language into your recommendation to the mayor and council to that effect? We're on the same side.
Well,
we really are.
But at least not with taxes. But yeah, I think we should do that, Dave.
That's wonderful. I thank you all. Thank you so much.
There's no more public comment. We'll be closing the public comment section at this time.
We need a motion to either recommend this ordinance for adoption, or not to recommend it, or to recommend it with changes or alterations or suggestions. As is set forth in the statute that I read at the beginning of this section of the meeting tonight, the town council, the governing body, can either accept or reject our recommendation. Our planner has advised us that what is proposed here is consistent with the master plan, and I would agree with that. The plan itself has been explained to you, and you've all been a part of the integral putting together of it at this point. So we need a motion to recommend or not to recommend this redevelopment plan as embodied in the ordinance which was sent to us to be a governing body, and then it's up to them to either adopt the plan or to modify it, or to ignore a recommendation, or to agree with a recommendation. And I think as a matter of law, this plan cannot go forward unless and until the settlement agreements, which are both in state and federal court, have been changed to allow the plan to go forward. Whether that'll happen or not, no one knows. If Mr. Leodori has his way, it'll never happen. Maybe if Mr. Hovnanian has his way, it'll happen. I don't know. But that's not for our board to decide tonight. The only thing we have to decide is, are we going to recommend the ordinance and the plan that we worked on for the last year for adoption to the town council. For that purpose, we need a motion, a second, and a roll call vote.
Prior to that motion, can I address the resident that wants me to step down?
I would not advise that under the circumstances. Let's not throw gasoline on a fire.
I would like just to make a comment.
You may make a comment, but it should not be directed to a particular citizen.
Should not be directed to where?
To a particular citizen.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I just want to explain myself. I'm new to the planning board. I was a New Jersey State Correction Officer for 30 years. I'm a little rough around the edges. My point at the council meeting the other night, because I was appalled at the angriness in the room, was to try to point out that this is not a project that the shovels were going in the ground, that it would take a long time. So I do apologize for coming out rough around the edges. But my integrity is not to be questioned. I don't think there's people in this room. I've lived in this town for 30 years. I've coached children in this town for 30 years. I'm very involved in the town, but I'm new to this. And I just want to say that I will continue to work for the residents of the township and do the best I can, but I am human. And I will make a mistake. And if I offended anybody, especially our seasoned adults, I truly wholeheartedly apologize. Thank you very much.
Could you speak up?
Yes, I need a microphone on. Turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Yes, I do make a motion to go forward with this and look into the plan.
So the motion, just so everybody's clear, is to recommend the ordinance and the redevelopment plan for adoption to the Township Council on second reading. Wait a second.
I'll second. Member roll call vote, please.
Ms. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Baumeister?
What is this now?
Please don't call out.
Mr. Ford?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bates?
Yes.
Ms. Solisi?
Yes. Next order of business, executive session, is the April 4th, 2016 regular
Can I ask
meeting
what
minutes.
the purpose of us coming here then? If you went over and just I watched it.
We
You don't
listen.
listen.
You really let them keep here.
Yeah, but yes.
But you did not hear. All over again.
Any comments or questions from members of the board? Members to my left? Members to my right? May I have a motion to approve the minutes, please? May I have a second? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Baumeister? Mr. Kara? Ms. Brush? Mr. Ford? Ms. Sarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Bates?
Payment of bills for the time period of May 2016 for the offices of Beazer Engineering, the time period of April 8th through April 30th. Escrow in the amount of $1,524. As well as $1,028 for a total amount of bills of $2,552 for the offices of Mr. Liston for the time period of April 28th through May 31st in the amount of $1,255.50. Total bills for the payment of May 2016 are $3,807.50. Need a motion to accept the payment of bills, please? May I have a second? Roll call vote?
Mr. Kara?
Yes.
Ms. Brush?
Yes.
Ms. Baumeister? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Sarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? And Mr. Bates?
Thank you. Professional reports, Mr. Cato? Thanks. Mr. Liston?
Nothing to report. We still haven't seen any new application for Walmart. It's been promised, but taking a little too long to conceive of it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments other than on the matter that was before the board tonight where we had a lot of public comment? Seeing none, Madam Chair, you can entertain a motion to adjourn.
May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All in favor? Aye.